So today's topic for our class is acute diarrhea, which is one of the most important topics in India as it is developing country. So diarrhea in infants and children is defined as an increase in frequency or decrease in consistency of stool lasting for 7 or 14 days. Precisely, stool volume more than 10 gram per kilogram per day in infants and more than 200 gram in children beyond 3 years of the age can be taken as diarrhea. However, most of the times acute diarrhea abates in 7 days. Therefore, diarrhea from 8 to 14 days is regarded as intermediate diarrhea. So these definitions are important because on the basis of this we classify as acute diarrhea, chronic diarrhea, persistent diarrhea and intermediate diarrhea. Epidemiology, it is, as I told, it is the second to respiratory diseases and one of the major causes of infant morbidity and mortality. So average Indian child below 5 years of the age gets 2 to 3 episodes of diarrhea per year, and the high incidence below 5 years, 80% mortality in between 6 months to 2 years. So we will come to etiology again in detail, but the common etiologies are low socio-economic status, low personal hygiene, bottle fed or malnutrition, early wearing and associated systemic infections predisposed for diarrhea. So I have highlighted here in red and bold. So these things needs to be remembered and they are the more common than other things. So etiology, we can divide it into infectious causes and non-infectious causes. Infectious causes are viral, which is the rotavirus, most common cause, then enteric adenovirus. Other viruses are Norwalk, calicivirus, astrovirus, coronavirus and HIV. Now in bacteria, the most common is E. coli, Salmonella, Shigella and Staphylococci. So we need to remember E. coli, then again it can be classified according to symptoms in EHEC, that is enterohemorrhagic E. coli, ETEC, enterotoxigenic E. coli and other forms. Then Salmonella and Shigella, Vibrio cholerae and Clostridium difficile. We will come to one by one in detail. Then parasitic Giardia and Entamoeba histolytica are the most common forms in India. Then food poisoning, it includes Staph aureus, Clostridium perfringens and Bacillus cereus. Then fungal candida, which can cause diarrhea, however it is the most rare and found in immunocompromised patients. Then systemic illness, this systemic illness is LRTI and UTI, again they can also cause diarrhea. So coming to non-infectious causes, in this non-infectious causes, diet, food allergy like milk allergy or wheat allergy, that is celiac disease, then food intolerance. So food allergy and food intolerance are the different terms. Food allergy gives the hypersensitivity reaction, whereas food tolerance is the long term condition which mimics with diarrhea or sometimes it can mimic with constipation. Then anatomic defects, which are usually congenital, these are malrotation of intestine, Hirschsprung disease. There will be a separate topic on Hirschsprung disease, a separate class. Then short bowel syndrome, microvillus atrophy. So what happens in this anatomic defects? There is decrease in the transit time. That is when the patient eats and the time stool comes out, that is called as the transit time. So in these cases like short bowel syndrome, microvillus atrophy, transit time is reduced. Then food poisoning, heavy metals and mushrooms. Heavy metals usually found in many medicines of and then mushrooms. Then endocrinopathies, thyrotoxicosis. So we should remember here that hypothyroidism can cause constipation and thyrotoxicosis can cause diarrhea. Malabsorption, that is disaccharidase deficiencies. So disaccharidase deficiency is the enzyme deficiency, that is deficiency of lactase enzyme that can be the congenital deficiency or it can be the induced deficiency. There is deficiency of enzyme in microvilli of small intestine which leads to malabsorption and improper digestion of lactose. So there is fermentation of lactose and that causes osmotic diarrhea. So here knowing the reason behind every cause is the important thing. Then pancreatic insufficiency again leading to malabsorption and diarrhea. Celiac disease again causes deficiency of lactase enzyme and also inflammatory process in microvilli of intestine leading to diarrhea. Then neoplasms, neuroblastomas, ganglioneuromas and ZE syndrome, which are usually rare conditions but still should be kept in mind for the diarrhea. Then the remaining causes are Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis and laxative abuse. Again the pathophysiology is same behind Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis, that is there is irritation of bowel mucosa and that irritation and inflammation also causes increased peristalsis along with enzyme deficiency leading to diarrhea. Now secretory diarrhea can be divided in 4 categories depending on the pathophysiology, that is secretory diarrhea, osmotic diarrhea, inflammatory diarrhea and motility diarrhea. So secretory diarrhea is toxin induced, usually it is caused because of food poisoning. Then osmotic diarrhea I have already explained, because of lactose intolerance, because there is lactase, that is disaccharide deficiency. Then inflammatory diarrhea, that is Shigella and enterohemorrhagic E. coli. This enterohemorrhagic E. coli and enterotoxigenic E. coli are the most common forms of E. coli in our India. Then motility disorder, Hirschsprung disease. Hirschsprung disease presents with constipation, but when it is long standing it can present with diarrhea as well. So there will be a separate class on this and I will be explaining pathophysiology behind this. Then anorectal malformations. So in this secretory diarrhea and osmotic diarrhea are the most common forms of diarrhea. In secretory diarrhea there is channelopathies, that is inflammation of sodium potassium pumps at microvilli leading to secretion of fluid in intestine, whereas in osmotic diarrhea there is increased osmolarity in the lumen of intestine leading to diarrhea and more fluid collection in intestine. Then markers of secretory diarrhea are the same, they are very easy to remember as usual in any type of diarrhea. Dehydration, there will be dyselectrolytemia because there is malfunctioning of sodium potassium 2 chloride channel. Then they are large volume stools because these channels are secreting actively. There is active secretion of fluid in intestinal lumen. Then stool sodium should be more than 70 milliequivalent per liter. And we go for stool electrolytes, but this is a costly investigation. Then stool is often alkaline, which can be found out in stool routine examination, and no effect with discontinuation of feeding. This is the most important thing, that there is no effect with discontinuation of feeding, that we can go for it in ward without any expenses, just we discontinue the feeding, and this discontinuation of feeding will not lead to any effect on the diarrhea. So when we discontinue the feeding, if there is effect on the diarrhea, this means it is the osmotic diarrhea. This is a simple bedside clinical practice to rule out, to differentiate in between clinical and osmotic diarrhea. Then this is the secretory diarrhea and it is the pathophysiology. As I told, there is cyclic AMP and then sodium potassium chloride channel. There is active secretion of sodium along, so that the sodium is more than 70 milliequivalent in stool. For this we go for stool electrolytes. Then coming to osmotic diarrhea, markers of osmotic diarrhea are same. Then children are often stable because there is lumen of intestine containing high osmotic load. Stools can be small or large volume depending upon the osmotic pressure. It can be watery or loose. Stool sodium, here it is important to differentiate that it is less than 50 milliequivalent per liter. Then stool osmolality is less than the ionic constituents and stool reaction is acidic. These are the difference in between osmotic and secretory diarrhea. We saw in secretory diarrhea the stool reaction was alkaline. So discontinuation, another difference is discontinuation of feed results in improvement, because there is no food, undigested food in the intestine, there is no osmotic pressure created, so there is discontinuation of results in discontinuation of feed results in improvement in diarrhea. Then there is perianal excoriation because of the lactase enzyme deficiency leading to converting lactose to lactic acid, causing reduction in pH as explained here. And this discontinuation of feed results in improvement. So all the things are interrelated to one another. If you remember one thing, then you can interpret the another thing automatically. Then pathophysiology of acute diarrhea. So diarrheal losses are drawn from extracellular compartment which constitutes circulating blood, interstitial fluid and body secretions. We will be coming to this in next slide, that why children give us a narrow window for the intervention when and they go into severe dehydration and then even they can expire, whereas in adults we get a broad window where we can intervene. So normally extracellular fluid turnover is 3 to 4 times greater than adults, and loss of fluid in diarrheal stool causes early and significant dehydration in infants. Proportionate loss in sodium results in isotonic dehydration. So again this is the important thing. There can be loss of sodium which can be more, it can be equal to, that is isotonic, and it can be less. So if it is proportionate loss, then sodium results in isotonic dehydration. If more loss of sodium than water, that is less sodium is remaining in blood, so it will be hyponatremic, that is serum will be hyponatremic. And more loss of water, that is more of the sodium is remaining in serum, so our serum analysis will be hypertonic dehydration. So most common here is the isotonic dehydration. Why it is important to categorize according to this isotonic, hyponatremic and hypertonic, because our fluid will be decided according to that. So this is the pictorial depiction of the fluid loss. So normally if we see that intake is 700 cc in an infant's weight is 7 kg, so extracellular fluid compartment will be containing 1400 cc, which is simply double of 700 cc, and if there is diarrhea, outgo will be 700 cc, so intake will be equal to outgo, and if it is more than outgo, it will start affecting extracellular fluid. Whereas when we come to adults, in adults intake is 2000 cc and extracellular fluid is 1400 cc, which is we can see the 7 times of intake. So if outgo is even if it is equal to intake, then we have a large window where we can intervene and adult will not go in dehydration. Okay. So this is again the same thing I have already explained. Sodium loss proportionate to water, sodium loss more than water, sodium loss less than water. So we will go on next slide. So it will be isotonic if it is proportionate to water, it will be hypotonic if sodium loss is in intestine, sodium loss is more than water, then the serum will become hypotonic. If sodium loss is less than water, it will become hypertonic. Now coming to clinical features. These clinical features we will go for history and examination. It is very important to take detailed history and detailed examination. In this detailed history, we ask for the presentation of stool. Okay, so till now we will complete till here only. Thank you for your patience listening.